Ugh, I want to learn something new.
Climb out of that attic, cause now you can with Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes covering all sorts of creative, business, or hobby-oriented skills. From graphic design to game development or even life organization skills, there's a little something for everyone. Whether you're looking to learn a new thing, refine your current skill set, or even break into a new career. With a premium membership, Skillshare gives you access to an unlimited amount of workshops and classes from hundreds of working professionals. I've actually been taking a look at logo designs with grids, cause maybe I'm working on something fancy myself. I can't afford this kind of stuff, man. I lived in an attic for 8 years. But what if I told you Skillshare is incredibly affordable at less than $10 a month?
$10?
So because Skillshare is sponsoring this video, if you sign up today using my link in the description, you can get a 2-month free trial. Signing up really helps the channel out, and you might be helping yourself out by opening up that learning brain and getting to work. Check out Skillshare today. When you think of Square Enix, you probably think of Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, or Dragon Quest. 3 large international franchises with a seemingly endless line of video games, toys, albums, live concerts, cafes, the works. I'm sure a couple of y'all might think of Tomb Raider or Just Cause, but what if we go way back? Before Squeenix, they were Squaresoft and Enix. 2 publishers, each with their own line of interesting and awesome games. But today we're gonna look specifically at good old Squaresoft prior to the merger. It's hard to imagine Squaresoft, the freaking beast of the PS1 era, having forgotten gems, but you might be surprised. When Final Fantasy was paying the big bills, Square could take all of these cool risks, and by God did they. Now I have already talked about a few of these. Tobal number 1 and Air Guys were tackled years ago. The Bouncer paid its dues, and Brave Fencer Musashi's like, okay. Wait, are there even any other games?
Oh, hey, look, I found. Oh, fuck!
Square games are not cheap. So yo, it's Austin, and today we're gonna be talking about some lesser known and forgotten Squaresoft games. Now I'm gonna do my best to veer away from the RPGs because titles like Vagrant Story or Chrono Cross do actually have a lot of notoriety. Instead, let's go back to the NES. We could go back further to Square's origins when they made visual novels for the PC-88, some of the eroge variety, but I can't read this. So let's take a gander at the pre-Final Fantasy days, the so-alleged dire straits. The first Square-developed video game to reach Western shores was King's Knight, but people know about this one since Noctis and Prompto won't shut up about it.
You ready to rumble, Noct?
In King's Knight? Oh yeah, I'm game.
And also Assassin's Creed.
The two of them happen to be rather fond of the Assassin's Creed series.
King's Knight was this fantasy-styled shoot-'em-up where you control 4 characters moving forward, shooting stuff. You have to blast your way to the end while collecting power-ups and key items in order to beat the game. However, if you die, that character's gone for good and you immediately move on to the next level. So, yeah, that sucks. The trailer for the mobile reboot called it a formation RPG, whatever that is. Oh, also, that game was shut down less than a year after launching, which is pretty sad. Yet somehow a new empire is still around. This game is absurdly hard. King's Knight's only real merit is that it has an early Nobuo Uematsu soundtrack. So yeah. Now, Square was releasing a plethora of obscure titles in Japan, like Cleopatra no Maho, which was this first-person dungeon-crawling JRPG, but we didn't get most of these. Instead, Square decided they would try to impress the States with the power of the third dimension. Well, stereoscopic 3D, anyways. The next games to come west were the 3D battles of World Runner and Rad Racer. Both were developed by Square, yet for some reason, World Runner got published by Acclaim. Weird. Both of these are extremely basic. In 3D World Runner, you just run forward, and in Rad Racer, you kinda just race. World Runner's kind of a rip on Space Harrier, but not as good. Mostly because in Space Harrier, you can fly around and shoot things constantly. In World Runner, you gotta jump over gaps, but sometimes the gaps are complete BS. Also, in order to pick up items like the fireballs, you gotta run into columns over and over and hope you get lucky, or, you know, die in the exact same manner. Sakaguchi, why? Why? For some reason, the World Runner soundtrack is just 3 songs, the level, boss, and ending themes, but you're mostly gonna be hearing this. It's not the worst song ever, but if it's the only thing you're hearing, it's gonna grate on you. And I know it's Uematsu, but like, I mean, you're up against this. y'all tried. It's not a terrible game, it's just kinda not much at all in this day and age. Rad Racer, on the other hand, y'all heard Outrun? I love this game. Seems like Square just kind of wanted to do console versions of whatever Sega was doing in the arcades back then. Rad Racer basically takes the Outrun concept and squishes it into a cartridge. You can flip between songs to listen to like in Outrun, and you have the same 3D scrolling backgrounds like in Outrun, and you go real fast like in Outrun, but I mean, just play Outrun, do that, that's way better. However, let's not forget about the most important thing about these video games, the 3D mode. Simply enough, it just pops up if you tap on the select button. You can't really capture it on footage very well, but basically the colors are flickering red and blue real fast. At least for World Runner anyway. If you're playing Rad Racer, you're gonna need a Japanese copy and one of those super dope Famicom 3D glasses hooked up to you, and you're just gonna look like the Terminator, but it's gonna look not that great, and you're gonna be like, wow, I sure spent money. So let's move forward a couple generations to the PlayStation 1. Y'all remember the time Squaresoft tried to make a fighting game? No, not these. In the mid-90s, Squaresoft helped formulate a new game dev studio called Lightweight, and here's their first game, Bushido Blade. Actually, I'm not even sure if we could classify Bushido Blade here as a fighting game. Typically with one of those, you got like a health bar, a time limit. You'll have lots of bouts with a lot of back and forward momentum. Meanwhile, Bushido Blade's all like, oh, okay, I won. That's right, a 3D fighting game where you can die in one hit. Sounds like a horrible idea on paper, but it's actually pretty fun. You pick a character and a weapon and then try to either outplay or outsmart your opponents. Bushido Blade is unique in that it incorporates limb damage into the gameplay. So let's say you end up in a longer bout where everyone's defending and running around like crazy. It's time to take advantage of the body damage system. You can attack your opponent's arms and legs to disable their joints. This can slow down their attacks or even just turn them into like a crawling mass of polygons. Kinda sad, really. You can even just disable someone to the point where they're just kinda laying on the ground. Every weapon has multiple stances and attack combos not listed in the game, but hidden in the manual or deep in the trenches of game FAQs. There's multiple ways to play, like POV mode, where you can study the way of the blade in the first person. Though I'm pretty sure this was made so you can just watch bamboo get sliced right in front of you. Have I mentioned this game looked great for the time? Because in 1997, Square was like, wah. And GoldenEye was like, wah. But Bushido Blade was like, wah. There's a decent amount of options for 2 players, but the story mode is where you learn all about the characters and lore. Every playable dude has their own opening cutscene, all very similar, and then you're tossed into combat where you're forced to listen to everything they have to say. Or, you know, do that. But you shouldn't, because that is against the Bushido code. That's right, Bushido Blade makes you play with honor. If you're just running around killing dudes without any honor, the game's gonna throw you into a sewer and you're gonna be like, wow, I'm a big piece of crap, I can't believe that I did this, oh my god.
I did not.
So in order to get to the proper ending, you have to only strike your enemies when they're right in front of you, not throw dirt in their eyes, not use sub-weapons, and wait till they are done talking. If you don't, the game calls you dishonorable, your family cuts contact with you, and Jason Square Enix will come to your house and personally take your copy of Bushido Blade away, so don't do that. But now, the burning question. Is it any fun to play? It's like, okay? Bushido Blade's real stiff, and that's kind of the point. Playing with a friend and pulling off ridiculous kills is a really good time. Coming back from multiple wounded limbs is exciting, but a lot of it feels chaotic and not deliberate. Granted, I think with enough time one could master the controls, but the extremely slow-paced movement isn't the most fun, especially when someone's just gonna do this the entire time. Frickin' John. In the spirit of fighting games back in the 90s, a sequel would come out, oh, so fast. So, how's Bushido Blade 2? Ooh. It's kinda like more of the same with a few tweaks. Instead of 3 fighting buttons, we're down to 2, a high and low attack. There's also new characters, including Tony Umeda. Tony Umeda. I don't know what it is with Japan and this type of caricature, but I ain't about it. The biggest difference is the story mode, where for some reason they decided to completely abandon the Bushido code. That's right. Toss dirt in their eyes, throw daggers at them, slice them in the back. We don't care. We don't give a sh.
Hokyoku Tsubame. Have you heard of the name? Here you go!
Oh yeah, you can also do that. The levels are more varied and you'll occasionally encounter batches of dudes to fight since it's not just one giant map. But since you can do those running kills now, some enemies are extremely easy to destroy, even the boss fights. Some people prefer the original, but I prefer the mechanics being simplified a bit. It's still an extremely slow-paced, potentially one-hit kill kind of fighting game, but now it's like 20% more accessible. There's also, and most importantly, English voice acting. It is, of course, fantastic.
I failed in my mission.
An enemy who I just killed said I was his brother.
I am Gengoro. And you? Impossible.
Prepare yourself, young man.
You're Tatsumi, aren't you? I'm Chihiro.
Is that Jim Hawking? It's like I walked into a Suncoast video and every mid to late 90s anime dubs being played at the exact same time. The coolest and probably most underused thing about Bushido Blade 1 and 2 is the inclusion of Link Mode, a rarely used feature of the PlayStation 1. This thing will let you hook up two PS1s together to two separate TVs and play some multiplayer games. You could do Doom, Cool Borders 2, Armored Core, and of course, both of the Bushido Blade games. Though I can't imagine anyone really using this since it's meant for the POV mode. What, just play normally on one TV. Lightweight would make a couple other games trying to recapture the Beyblade hype with the Kengo series, but these all had a solid reception of These days they're making random licensed games like Hello Kitty Cruisers. You know, the polar opposite of this. It's a shame because Bushido Blade is such a cool concept, one that I think would be revisited and done better in games like Chivalry or Mordhau. Honestly, you'd have more fun playing those instead. But if you're craving that old school low poly jank-skiven fighting game, the Bushido Blades aren't too bad.
You're as strong as I thought, dear brother.
How about that Times Square made shoot 'em up? Also in 1997, a mere half a year after the first Bushido Blade, Einhander popped onto Japanese store shelves. Continuing their non-RPG rampage, Square decided to dip into the Gradius market and make a 2.5D shoot 'em up, which at the time, Galaxy brained that entire audience. Typically, and even still to this day, most shmups stick to 2D. Now, while this genre isn't the most popular in the States, overseas you'll find entire floors of game centers dedicated to them. Walking through that section's like listening to a hellfire of constant bullets, a wave of noise that's impossible to be heard over! So what is an Einhander? Some of y'all might recognize it as that one unlockable ship in Kingdom Hearts 3 or World of Final Fantasy, but actually...
It was feared, and because of its shape, called Einhander.
Oh, so like German. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Einhander as in ein hand, as in a hand, cause the ship vaguely looks like a hand. I know a lot of people who only ever got to play the demo off of that one Squaresoft collector's disc. It's probably because A, the game is big money these days, and B, the cover doesn't really pull you in. It's all blurry, the game's logo's kind of tucked up in the corner. It doesn't even look like a hand. Freaking Tunnel B1 has a better looking cover than this. Meanwhile, the Japanese cover grabbed my attention immediately with its x-ray photo of a hand reaching for the Doritos. Sure, this doesn't tell me jack about this game, but it does make me interested in what it is. Also, the demo disc did this. How dare. How dare you! So what's the catch? Well, the hand thing isn't just like, hey, the ship kind of looks like a hand. It's actually an integral part of the game's mechanics. When you destroy enemies, you have a chance to pick up their weapons and load them onto your ship's gun pods. There's a couple different ships that you can pilot, each with their own different layouts. Some have 2 gun pods and will blow through ammo, others have a permanent machine gun they can use. You have to not only pick up these weapons, but rotate their positioning on your ship in order to aim. Some weapons might fire backwards, some might fire at an angle. You'll be flipping them around mid-fight a lot, which keeps things really exciting. Not that things aren't already crazy, since this is one of those you die in one hit kind of games. Except in this one, when you die, you restart at a checkpoint. Yeah, normally with these, it's like, dang it, wow. Let's keep going. But in Einhander, do it in one try. Okay, I'll try. It's hard, but extremely fun to play. Anytime the perspective shifts from 2D to a more behind the ship kind of angle, you know stuff's about to go down. To top it off, Einhander has a ridiculous soundtrack composed by Kenichiro Fukui, an ex-Konami dude who would go on to play keyboards in Nobuo Uematsu's The Black Mages. Yeah, those Black Mages. His OST feels like it belongs somewhere in between Parasite Eve and Air Gaze. It leans heavily into drum and bass while occasionally taking a break for more melodic, funky stuff. You'll be blasting and dodging giant cops and robots while these sweet tunes play in your ear, and it's kind of a perfect fit. Like any shmup, Einhander is extremely short, but weirdly doesn't have any kind of multiplayer component. Because of these things, no matter how good everything else is in this game, it's hard to recommend at the price point you see everywhere. It's definitely a collector's item these days. Also weird is the fact that despite developing Einhander, Square didn't publish it. Working Designs wanted to do it because that's exactly what Working Designs would want to do, but instead, Sony did it themselves. This might be part of the reason we've never seen a US re-release or even PS1 classic version of Einhander, despite the Japanese store having it on PSN. Poor Europe didn't even get this one. Sorry guys, but you're used to it. If you ever get a chance to play Einhander and you don't have to pay $100, do it in a heartbeat because it's not just a Squaresoft gem, but one of the most unique games on the PlayStation 1. How about that time Square threw the game on the ground? Driving Emotion, Type S. Now, it's not the first time Square made a driving game. There's a Japanese-only PS1 game called Racing Lagoon, probably not a sequel to the other Japanese-only SNES game, Bahamut Lagoon. Probably. This was a hybrid of a street racing game and RPG. It's pretty to look at. Well, at least the races. I don't know about this. It's weird as heck and also was reviewed poorly. Ouch. Fast forward a year and Square's tossing another racing game into the wild. This time the racing a bit more legal. Driving Emotion Type S. No, I'm not just saying random words. This is a real name of a real Squaresoft game for the real PlayStation 2. What does it mean? What is Driving Emotion? What in the world differentiates Type S from other types? The manual and game have absolutely nothing to say about that though. Based on the cover and this little thing here, I think it's supposed to be like that feel when drifting, or as I'll now call it, drifty feels. The back of the box is super pretentious. The sensation of driving. Many racing games have strived for this goal. Now technology has finally caught up with ambition, and racing games have entered a new dimension. 2000 was a funny time, especially with Gran Turismo 3 just around the corner. There's not too much to say about Drifty Feels besides it's a racing sim, although not a very good one. Now it is cool that the game wants you to play in first person, considering all the work they did with the car interiors. Probably because the cars are big jaggy. It's basically a glorified tech demo for the PS2 and graphics with some fun, funky songs that remind me of like Daytona USA, but not as extreme. Too bad Gran Turismo 3 was out less than a year later. When Drifty Feels came out in the States, apparently it only sold 2,500 copies in its first week. Like, is this a rare game? I guess no one wants it though, considering it goes for like $1 or $2. I'm not the biggest on car sims, especially when I can just play Forza Horizon, but Emotion Type S kinda just sucks. It's barely got any content and the controls feel really off. Also, if you spin out the AI, it has no idea what to do and just sits still for a while. Nice. You should pass on this one, but it is really weird. Square, how about the next time you guys do this, you get a Snoop Dogg. He's easy, right?
Doggy, D-O-double-G in the Gran Turismo 3.
Alrighty, let's tackle one more game today. How about the time Squaresoft made an action RPG platformer that wasn't Brave Fencer Musashi or The Bouncer? Did I do it? Squaresoft made a lot of games on the PlayStation 1. If you count re-releases and Japanese-only titles, they pushed out over 40. That's 40 in 4 years, which is absolutely absurd. I don't even think it would be wrong to say that most of these are pretty good, but sliding in less than a month before the controversial yet fantastic Chrono Cross was a little game called Threads of Fate, or as it was known in Japan, Dew Prism. This was pretty unusual for Squaresoft. I mean, you look at the cover and see anime and an extremely extra logo, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is definitely a Squaresoft game. But when you play it, the thing feels more like your Alundra 2s or Dual Hearts, except a little better than that. I would say Threads of Fate is the natural evolution of Brave Fencer Musashi, an action RPG Squaresoft released the year prior. I've talked about it in the past, but Musashi's a bit rough these days. However, despite faring about as well in reviews, Threads of Fate seems to be a little more lost with time. Probably because Musashi had the demo disc. Also, Threads of Fate is probably the most generic name for a video game. From Dew Prism? Come on, it's a bad choice. So Threads of Fate's main hook was the fact that you have 2 characters to play as, each with their own story, narrative, and gameplay style. This here's Rue. He's the mysterious type who has amnesia. He's found a caretaker in Claire who, within 3 minutes of pressing the start button, eats the big one. Also, pause. Rue's design, oh my god. It's drawn well and everything, but there's a whole lot going on right now. This punk definitely looks like fate decided his threads. Rue's got 2 different shoes, a weird flat top hat with a bandana wrapped around it, and a checkerboard sash tucked into something. Not to mention, he predates Final Fantasy Tactics guy with this massive pizza cutter. Imagine walking around in public with this. This is what happens when your mom dresses you at 30. Meanwhile, the lead female character, Mint, is like normal. Like, hey guys, I'm just here to have fun. Actually, that's not true, because Mint's whole story is that she's a spoiled jackass who wants to take the throne from her sister and achieve world domination. Uh-oh. Mint and Rue are both in search of the relic, specifically in parentheses. The relic has the power to make dreams come true or something, and both of them want it for their own selfish means. Ladies and gentlemen, our heroes. If we're talking just aesthetically, Threads of Fate is pretty pleasant. The characters and world are all written well enough to have a lot of personality and even comfort to them. The main town is cozy to walk around, and the accompanying music in the entire world is kind of perfect. Junya Nakano's soundtrack might not be up to the compositional heights that other Squaresoft composers can achieve, but I think his score works very well with this. The graphics are also pretty good for the time, and some of the in-engine cutscenes are fantastically done. That low poly look is one of my favorites, and it looks great here. Seeing the 2 main characters interact in their different stories is cute, even if they follow the exact same path for a majority of the game. Although sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, I did a thing off screen, aren't I neat? However, being an action RPG means that Squaresoft has to do the thing that they have not done their entire career, and they tried. Each character has their own systems to play with. Rue is a shapeshifter, and he can transform into a bunch of the monsters that you can slay in the game. Each monster here has their own set of abilities, both combat and utility. You can be swinging your sword around and then be like, okay, it's time to become a fire-breathing lizard thing. Or, I gotta jump real high, so I'll be a monkey. Rue can switch in combat between any of the last few monster coins he's collected, and that's a pretty neat concept. Well done, you did it good. Too bad Rue's kind of a big, clunky mess to control. That 3-swing combo's no good. Mint, on the other hand, is an agile wizard type. You unlock spells with casting modifiers as you progress through the game. She's also faster and more fun to control, with her not pizza cutter sword attacks making more sense, even if it's like 2 giant rings, like, they float, I don't get it. Both characters do not gain experience points like in a traditional RPG, but instead it uses a system more akin to Final Fantasy II, which is just a big ol' mistake. You can increase your HP and MP by using them, meaning by taking damage and casting spells. You also keep your gains if you die, so you can just die over and over to increase your HP. Except I doubt that, because Threads of Fate is extremely easy. It's like a walk in the park. You know, the public park by the lake where the homeless people are chilling out, paying you to fight them. This isn't a sustainable business model, Rod! The only difficulty you'll probably have going through Threads of Fate will be the tedium of stat grinding and the 3D platforming. Oh god, the platforming. Most of the game, it's a mild gripe or something that'll lead to cheap and easy deaths, which are immediately recovered from. Just like, okay, this boss is too easy, let's put death holes everywhere. Let's make death holes. But then you get to Fancy Mel's place, which, by the way, look at this zone transition. Seamless. She has these platforming mini games you have to do, and move over Mario. Threads of Fate is in town.
Here we go!
It's the worst. It's turbo bad. It's the worst that it's ever been. I want to break something. I want to break it. Other than that, Threads of Fate is I think Squaresoft laid the groundwork for some really cool stuff with the monster transformation systems and even the platforming, but this was it for Dew Prism. It's definitely the most ambitious game in the video, but I think its inability to really shine has people leaving it behind. Games like Xenogears and Vagrant Story have their devout cult followings, but Threads of Fate will probably just be that obscure PlayStation 1 title, destined to remain that way. Well, that's all for today. I know I just said Vagrant Story and Xenogears, and you're probably like, yo, but what about those though? And I'll talk about them. Probably. One day. Bye-bye. Special Patreon shout out to Alfredo Ariano, Brandon Howell, Chris Shelton, Christopher Olivia, Cliff Pro, Dig Muguruza, Donald Dowdy, David Molnar, Eli Shane Staufenecker, Flaming Fighter, Irrational, Jay Roos, Jeff Hichos, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Josh Garbage Lord, Legend Gary, Nitron, Filamentus, Plasma Phoenix, Ronnie Vile, and Vlad Lust. Thank you very much for your generous support. Final Fantasy IX needed a little bit more time in the oven. Also, that game is longer than I remember, but it's coming along. In the meantime, I have this and a couple other videos, and I'm hoping that you enjoy and are excited for them. Check out the Discord in the link below. Check out my Twitch. I'm streaming because Castlevania was not the best. Love you, bye.